Hi, everybody. Welcome to Smarter News. We have a big headline from the FDA and some unique insight to this story. So, I wanted to make sure to highlight it for you because of the potential impact for all of us and all of our families. Today, the FDA announced that they are initiating the removal of black box warnings on hormone replacement therapies for women. So, what does that mean and why does it matter? Well, black box warnings, similar to warnings that you may see on medications, are these stark, very visible warnings about potential scary side effects. Now, we've all seen those commercials that list off all the different side effects of a medication, but these are very different. You'll see these black box warnings when you go and pick up your prescription. And many, including the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary, believe that these sort of warning labels have deterred both physicians and patients from taking a medication that could really, really help them at a specific time in their life. And any medication that could help women affects American society overall. So the FDA is initiating the removal of these black box warnings. It won't happen overnight, but they're moving in that direction. And the hope is that this will open up more access for both physicians and patients to feel more comfortable with these treatments. It's not that these treatments weren't available for the last several decades. It's just that the concern was so high about side effects that many believed that it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the chance. This was a big topic of conversation that I talked to Dr. Marty Makary about, the head of the FDA, back in September. And the reason why I talked to him about this topic is it was very clear when he assumed the leadership role at the FDA that women's health was going to be a top priority for him. In fact, one of the first panels that the FDA broadcast under his leadership was about hormone replacement therapy and women. And he shared a very personal story about how he felt affected by these black box warnings as a physician and how he felt that his family was impacted because of the lack of prescription that was given to his mother during a key time in her life. Now, it's not that these medications don't have any side effects. And it's not that there aren't some critics of this decision by the FDA. I'm speaking to you on Monday, November 10th. This announcement has just been published officially. Surely over the next several days, there is going to be a more robust debate about whether or not this is good or this is bad. But for right now, the response has been fairly muted. There are those that say that they're a little bit critical of the FDA's process in this. They'd like to see more of an advisory panel put together about how to look at a variety of different hormone replacement therapies. There are those that are concerned that removing the black box warning off of all hormone replacement therapies equally is unwise, and perhaps some warnings do apply to certain types of therapies. So expect this conversation to continue. But I spent 20 minutes talking to Dr. Makary about this, and it is a conversation that covers a lot of ground. So I wanted to bring it back up to you so you could listen to the short part of our much longer interview that took place back in September. And as you're listening to it, I think you're going to see how the FDA was telegraphing there was a change to come and why they believe this is so important for America. So without further ado, here's a short portion of this interview. Also, just check out your show notes. I linked to our entire interview, which lasted an hour at the FDA headquarters. We covered a lot of ground: Tylenol, autism, hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, as you'll hear discussed. We talked about compounding pharmacies, getting your prescriptions online, prescription ads. We even talk about what the FDA believes is the next big threat for our children, what they describe as the next fentanyl. So it's a wide-ranging conversation. I hope you enjoy it, but here's this short portion for you. So hopefully this is accessible and easy for you to learn a little bit more about why this is such big news today. Thank you for your support of quick, concise, nonpartisan news. So without further ado, let me take you back to September. We're sitting down at the FDA headquarters with the head of the FDA, Dr. Marty Makary. Speaking of associations, we're going to kind of switch topics now. There in the past was an association that wasn't, or that many have been critical of. We can talk about this, an association between hormone replacement therapy and estrogen specifically and breast cancer came out of a big study many, many years ago and has been the common thought. This was the topic of conversation of a panel that the FDA held recently. And I have to admit to you, some of what was discussed on this panel, I had never heard about. And I exist in the world as a woman, and hormones are a major part of my life, Dr. Makary. I mean, quite frankly speaking. So talk to us a little bit about why hormone replacement therapy was one of the first topics that you tackled as the new head of the FDA.
Well, the topic's been dominated by misinformation that's not supported by data. And there probably is no single medical intervention that can improve the health of women at a population level more than hormone replacement therapy when started before age 60. That is within 10 years of the onset of perimenopause. The long-term health benefits are tremendous. So we tend to just think about the short-term benefits, that is alleviating the symptoms of perimenopause, the hot flashes, the brain fog, night sweats, dryness. There's 50 plus symptoms of perimenopause. And people have downplayed hormone therapy thinking, oh, well, women need to get over their symptoms. And if this helps them a little bit, maybe then it's okay. Well, just not only are those symptoms massively misunderstood by the medical establishment. I was taught in medical school that some women have perimenopausal symptoms. It lasts a couple years and they're usually mild. Well, the average duration of symptoms is 8 to 10 years. 80% of women have symptoms and they're often severe. I mean, marriages get destroyed, all kinds of very debilitating symptoms. Tragically, just think about the brain fog and the cognitive decline. A woman is more likely to be prescribed an antidepressant for perimenopausal symptoms in America today than they are hormone replacement therapy. And one of the reasons is that doctors have been ingrained with a dogma that it increases the woman's risk of breast cancer mortality when no clinical trial has ever shown that hormone replacement therapy started before age 60 increases breast cancer mortality. So if we can get beyond that dogma, tell people the truth, which is what you saw, in my opinion, many of our experts do at the FDA expert roundtable that we held a few months into my coming into office, we can start talking about the tremendous long-term health benefits. The number one cause of death in women in the United States is heart disease. Hormone therapy has been found to reduce the risk of fatal heart attacks by 25 to 50%. I mean, statins don't even hit some of those numbers, and we're pushing statins all the time. Bone strength, cognitive decline. One study found a 35% reduced risk of Alzheimer's. And so women live longer and feel better on hormone replacement therapy.
It's interesting when we talk about women's health, we get very narrow focused into what the symptoms are for the woman, not thinking as well, what is the effect on the entire family? As you mentioned, what's the effect on the marriage? What's the effect as she's embracing motherhood at that time or not? It depends. It doesn't really matter. What is it like for her at work? And there seems to have been a dismissal of some of these symptoms that you're describing as something that she should just tough out and get through. And if you don't have a serious health issue, if you're not really showing a heart problem or you don't have, really, you're getting lost on the way home because you're so disoriented, well, then you don't really get that. I actually had a doctor once tell me, oh, well, it's too hard to look at hormones just because they change all the time. That's actually tragic. What was an exact quote from a doctor. So, if that's what you're getting when you're talking about symptoms, that's a hard thing to navigate if you don't have a medical background.
The medical field bought hook, line, and sinker the concept that it was going to increase breast cancer mortality in 2002. Women got calls from their doctors, hey, this new study just came out, which, by the way, came out in the media before it came out in the medical literature. When you go into the study, as I've described.
And this is actually something we should talk about more in depth. Maybe not today, but I think it's a very interesting, it's not just about the study, which was some information that was extrapolated that was wrong. It was also that the way that journalists presented the information also was misleading. So you had two different things happening at the same time, and it shows you the power of a story to last, to have legs for decades if it's not immediately corrected or more context provided.
And the power of fear. I mean, when you dangle fear around something as sensitive as breast cancer to women.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, the fear machine took over. And it took over in the minds of doctors, too, because the reality is that doctors get their information from television as well sometimes, and that this just became a dogma. It had big branded institutions behind the so-called study. even though if you dive deep into the study, there was no statistically significant increase in breast cancer in the original 2002 study. But 80% of women flushed their pills down the toilet or ripped off their patches, and it became this taboo thing. All of a sudden, this miracle intervention for so many women was now a carcinogen in their minds. And tragically, to this day, you talk to 7 out of 10 doctors about hormone replacement therapy, they'll tell you, ooh, I
Hmm.
worry about that breast cancer thing. I've had hour-long conversations with doctors, and in the end, they're like, I had no idea that's what the data actually shows.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting. And I have a family history of breast cancer, so I also know that it is nuanced. There are conversations to have about hormones. Let's talk about warning labels because we talked about the warning label for Tylenol.
Right.
What about the estrogen? Comes in a lot of different forms, a lot of different hormone replacement therapies in general. But there was a lot of conversation in this panel. And our audience was very curious about this, about black box warnings. Is that the same as a warning I would see on a container of Tylenol, or is this
No,
something different?
it's
Why
much
does that
different.
matter?
It is a big banner warning, sort of a very like an alert that says, warning, this can cause blank or blank. And it's on all the different types of estrogen, the systemic estrogen and the topical estrogen. So the fear machine of 2002 has done not only tremendous damage in scaring off women and doctors from considering this amazing therapy, but also it's resulted in the FDA reacting in the groupthink and putting these black box warnings. So when a doctor says, hey, I've evaluated your situation, you don't have a contraindication because there are some rare contraindications, I recommend starting hormone replacement therapy. Then you pick it up from the pharmacy and you see this black box warning. And so it's fueled this sort of fear machine out there. So the FDA is taking a strong look at removing the black box warnings on estrogen.
What do you think the impact of that would be?
Well, look, I think people are starting to come around that it does not increase breast cancer mortality, that the fear machine resulted in groupthink 23 years ago that may have represented one of the biggest mistakes of modern medicine, depriving 50 million women of a therapy that allows them to feel healthier, live longer, uh, uh, be far less likely to break a bone if they trip or fall or get into a car accident later in life. You know, when you get to age 80, a woman has a high risk of a hip fracture. It's like 1 in 3 women. And so when you have a therapy that results in stronger bones, that fights osteoporosis, you're far less likely to have a hip fracture. Well, that's a common cause of death in older women. So it is an incredible public health tool that doctors want to use, but we have to get over the fear machine.
So you're saying that removing the black box warning would be both beneficial for patients and for practitioners because it removes a very visible reminder of an association that you and others don't believe is there.
That's right. It since there's no increase in breast cancer mortality, what are we doing? We are, of course, going to include all the data deep in the label that it comes with the medication, so they can look at the odds ratio and get as wonky as they want on the details about breast cancer and the effect size. But to suggest that it increases breast cancer mortality, which the black box labels do in front and center, I think it's done a tremendous disservice. I think the entire topic has been treated terribly by the medical profession, by the establishment, by the media. And I think we owe it to women to get the truth out so they can make their own decisions.
It's challenging. I think about that time, 2 decades really of a common belief. This is still the black box warning that we're talking about. We're still talking about estrogen cream. What about systemic estrogen?
Same thing.
You,
Same
that
thing.
the black box warning the FDA is taking a look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and it's because people have sent us letters saying, this is scaring away my patients, and I'm trying to give them a therapy that makes sense. Now, whether or not you add progestin to the estrogen depends on whether or not a woman still has a uterus. If they do have a uterus, then it's highly recommended that you also take progestin to prevent endometrial hyperplasia or maybe even endometrial cancer. So this needs to be managed by a clinician, but we have heard over and over again that the demonization of hormone replacement therapy with the attitude that just have women suffer, ignoring the long-term benefits. I mean, just the reduction in cognitive decline is up to 65%. So you're talking about the health of a population. And up to 1 in 4 middle-aged women in the United States are taking treatment for depression. Well, can we get at the root cause? Estrogen is a hormone naturally made by the body. It just drops off its natural production at a certain age. So we're talking about continuing a body's natural hormone.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about medical dogma, which is a term that you brought up during this panel that really sat with me because I thought, what does Dr. Makary really mean by that? And how tough is that to change? What do you mean by medical dogma? Because it seems that what you're describing here is this groupthink about hormone therapy for women. How difficult is it to provide a different perspective and to get people on board?
You know, I was telling you earlier, my time at Johns Hopkins and in the cafeteria doing research across so many different specialties, I learned a lot. I learned there are some common themes in every one of the 84 major specialties in medicine. Every specialty has its medical dogma. It has assumptions that many doctors in the field need to be challenged. And so one of those things is medical dogma. So we demonized natural saturated fat as a medical profession. For 50 years, we got that wrong. We gave, the American Academy of Pediatrics gave the wrong guidance on how to prevent peanut allergies in children, telling them to avoid peanut butter until they were age 3. That was the wrong guidance. Turns out that didn't reduce your risk of peanut allergies. It increases the risk of peanut allergies and may explain why we have a peanut allergy epidemic today because of 15 years of dogma. And so opioids are non-addictive. For 17 years, that was dogma. So we've had an epidemic of medical dogma. It can take on a life of its own. And the way we fight medical dogma is with good data.
Is the science ever settled? I heard that term,
No, I don't
right? Like
think so.
science, the science is settled. The consensus says this. You hear that a lot with
Yeah.
health stories these days. And as a journalist, sometimes it's very difficult to navigate that because I want to acknowledge consensus and also embrace curiosity because good journalism does both of those things.
Yes, and good science does both of those things. Yeah, I think that we've seen a lot of convenient arguments crop up, especially in the era of COVID, to sort of censor or silence different opinions. And the public now sees the dogma we saw during COVID of cloth masks on toddlers for nearly 3 years, covering the face of a young child with a cloth mask. Um, Ignoring natural immunity, that was a terrible mistake. It created distrust. Pushing COVID boosters in young, healthy kids, ignoring myocarditis in young men. So we even saw a recent version of that sort of groupthink in medicine. I think you fight bad ideas with more ideas. It's good to have a disagreement. Controversy is good. We can have a discussion among experts. I think it's okay for the public to see that discussion. And in the case of hormone replacement therapy, I love it when somebody gets deep in the data. I try to explain all the data on this topic in a recent piece I wrote, because I think look, I've had patients that have said, Doc, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And other people say, I want to understand this better. And the question is, science settled? Well, there comes a point as a surgeon where you have to make a decision with the information that's available. So you can't say, look, this is, I'm only going to use settled science. Most of what we do in medicine is discretionary. But you get to a point where you have to make a decision.
Yeah, it's interesting. In an interview recently, you said medicine is an art, which I think is an interesting description because most would say, well, it's a science.
Yeah.
But one of the things we've learned through the pandemic is that it is changing. There's a lot of changes. And sometimes that change can be uncomfortable. I have to ask you about testosterone really quick because I know we talked a lot about estrogen.
Yeah.
But I heard this in the panel and I was just so surprised that there's no FDA approved dose of testosterone for women in America. Is that true?
Well, what the concern was that came up in the panel is that it's still a Schedule III controlled substance because of the 1980s doping scandals. And so this
Are they worried about women just like going a little too far? Is that where it's going?
I guess that was the original concern at the time. So we're looking at that. We're looking at that issue. The studies now are showing benefit to low dose testosterone in men and women after a certain age. And so here you have something that may have a clinical cardiac benefit because Testosterone is known to generally increase muscle mass, and part of that is the mass of the heart muscle. And so a stronger heart is a good thing, and studies are now supporting some of that.
So, what are your thoughts on all the different sort of health businesses that have popped up that provide hormones to people through compounding pharmacies because it's not a typical or traditional prescription for something like testosterone?
Well, there's a wide range of suppliers out there, and it's not as simple as this is where I pick up my testosterone. It's often an injectable, it can be given as a pellet or a cream. You may not get all your options at one particular place that tends to do it just one way. So you really want an astute clinician to be able to provide the options, and I think also do some blood work to make sure that you benefit from it.
So, is the FDA also working on that topic as well for
Well,
women?
we do oversee, so we are looking into testosterone, absolutely, yes. We also have jurisdiction over compounding pharmacies and online pharmacies. Online pharmacies in general, and most of them are very good actors, but some of them have been marketing drugs with no mention of side effects. So it's unfair to pharmaceutical companies that have very stringent regulations that they have to state the pros and cons when you run a pharmaceutical ad. And so some of the online pharmacies have said, you know what, we're just not going to do that. They've been brazen. You may have seen the Super Bowl ad for, I think it was Hims and Hers, where they're parading around a medicine with no mention of side effects. And there are side effects that people need to be aware of. We are increasing our enforcement action on direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical ads, online pharmacies advertising pharmaceutical products, and paid social media influencers paid by pharmaceutical companies to promote drugs. I realized the FDA had become increasingly lax on the topic of pharma ads, to the point where now they flood the airwaves, and it was rare. When we were growing up, you'd rarely see a pharma ad. Well, the FDA used to take enforcement action. They used to send 100+ letters a year when they would monitor ads that this didn't meet the regulation. It was creating a quote-unquote misleading impression, which you cannot do per our regulations. Well, in 2023, 2 years ago, the FDA only sent one enforcement letter. And last year, I found out they sent zero. Well, I've been in the job about 5 months or so. So a few weeks ago, I sent out 100+ enforcement letters and another 1,500 letters to the industry warning them that we're going to take these actions very seriously on pharmaceutical ads.
What about legislation just to outlaw pharmaceutical ads in general?
Yeah, so there's been bipartisan legislation. It's never been passed, but it's been proposed, co-sponsored by people like Bernie Sanders and Roger Marshall.
Yeah, I'm always so curious to know that other countries don't have that because it's so pervasive here. I was actually telling our team as I was getting ready for this interview, sometimes I jump on the treadmill and watch, live YouTube. That's my new thing, Dr. Makary. I try to get my steps in.
Good.
I'm trying to get in my work at the same time. Sometimes it's a news show. Sometimes it's trash television. I can't say everything is super intellectual. However, every ad is the same because they're repeated in this way. I either have an ad for Botox, an ad for an antidepressant, or an ad for
psoriatic arthritis.
GLP-1s.
Yes,
And
GLP-1s.
I wonder why I get off the treadmill feeling a little discouraged,
No,
it's
that's right.
because
I give up. I'll take it. I don't know what it is. I'll take it.
it's like, I get it. I'm being targeted, But to your point, they are very pervasive, and I don't know who actually checks what's out there. And I know it's been a conversation for years about pulling those ads off. So we'll see what legislation comes up. Just really quick, just want to finish that point. The FDA is looking at very seriously those black box warnings on estrogen is a matter of priority. And you believe that the life for my daughter, when I think about healthcare for my daughter, she's 9, it could look dramatically different than the healthcare I'm receiving right now in my 40s as her mother.
Yes, women deserve good information. Historically, issues of women's health have been underappreciated, underrecognized, and have been loaded with more medical dogma. And so I believe very passionately that women deserve the right information. That's why we are re-examining the black box warnings. It's why one of my first actions was to have the panel on hormone replacement therapy for perimenopausal women. It's still a decision between a patient and their doctor, but gosh, the potential public health benefits are overwhelming.
Yeah.
My mom was one of those women who never was put on hormone therapy because the study in 22 scared the crap out of her doctor. She was never even offered it. Well, she's had 2 broken bones from falls. probably wouldn't have fractured her bones and have that disability and all that medical expense had she had the stronger bones with hormone therapy. So it is a bit personal for me as well.
Yeah, I could understand that. So we'll watch that. I was very interested to hear that it's not just for the estrogen cream, that you're looking at it for systemic estrogen as well. I think that's really big
Yes.
news. So we'll be paying close attention to that.